be just talking together with Erika and Stephen from Iwataken, things about marriage and the things that they've learned. I'm Rae-Anna, Aya, and Jeff.
よろしくお願いします。
So I'm Stephen, and my story is inseparable from the work of God and the grace of God in my life. So we've known each other since college, but even before we knew each other, the Lord was definitely protecting me. We know about this ministry, of course, and we're excited to share as a part of it. But I have got to be humble in saying, man, it wasn't through special techniques or a deep theological sense that I was able to get through pre-marriage days pure and without having had sex. It was the grace of God, and He really protected me. So I grew up in Northern California in the United States of America, and I had a mixed family background. I already have a mixed heritage, and then I also went through foster care, and God really showed His faithfulness through those years. But sexually, although I did get into pornography and had girlfriends and things like that, and no one ever really told me much about sex and stuff like that, and no one ever warned me about the damage that it could do before marriage, but I think God carried me through that. So it was in college that we met, and I was at a point where I was saying, like, man, I don't know if I'm going to find the one for me. And I'm okay with being single the rest of my life, God. And by that time, I was trying my best to live for Him. And then I ran into Erika.
Well, my family background, I'm half Japanese, half American. My mother's American, my dad's Japanese. And yeah, our family moved around a lot. Growing up, we lived in Singapore, California, in America, and then in Japan while I was in high school, and then I went to California for university. We met in university. We met when I was 20, and he was a year older than me. Yeah, we got married, so then I was 22, he was 23, and now we will be married for 5 years.
I was just wondering about what were you taught and how did that kind of impact you and your decision for how to date?
Yeah. So I wasn't taught very many messages, as I mentioned, at all. In fact, I remember the first sexual exposure, I guess, was I loved sports, and there's a magazine in America called Sports Illustrated, and so I had a subscription, and once a year they have like a swimsuit issue. And it came in the mail, and I looked at it, as maybe a 12-year-old boy or some 10-year-old boy, and I was like, oh wow, and I hit it, and that was, I didn't know how to deal with my feelings, and I remember the only time I had the slightest of conversations with my parents was when I was looking at a clothing store catalog, and I wasn't looking at it in any particular way, but my dad walked by as I happened to be flipping through the underwear section. And so he said, oh, don't hide it, it's natural. And that's about all I received. And so, yeah, I remember in high school, some doctor of I don't remember what he was a doctor of, but at a school assembly, he talked about STDs, and he talked about, being careful with sex because it's a rope. Every physical connection you have, the greater the physical connection, the greater the psychological connection as well. So if holding hands is a thread, maybe kissing is a rope, and maybe sex is a chain. And you bring those into your marriage. and I remember that did stick with me as well. But that was pretty much most of the messages that I got.
Sounds very similar to mine. I was in, a slightly different generation, slightly older generation, but
Only slightly.
only slightly. But a similar, your father and mother being very, even though I was brought up in the church, father and mother being very silent on those things, and occasionally they dropped a bomb, and you're kind of like, what did that mean? What did that mean? But you're kind of left to fend for yourself for the most part.
That's right.
Yeah. My mom, she wanted to give me a purity ring. That's a ring that you put on your ring finger, and it says true love waits on it. She encouraged me, in this way you can make a promise to God that you're going to wait until marriage, and that's his design. And I don't remember her going into too much depth about it, but I think I understood the concept and I wanted to do it. From that point, I basically had it on until we got married. So about 10 years. And yeah, I think it's really that commitment that I made, like as a verbal commitment with my mom, and then also unto the Lord, and that kind of solidified in my heart of like, okay, this is like it's a promise I'm making to God, and to follow through on that. My family was living in Japan when I was in high school. There was a missionary family there from America. The missionary mom and her daughter, who was like my age, the mom wanted to start this purity study together. She was so open in talking about it. It wasn't like an embarrassing topic at all. And she like shared her own story of how she didn't wait until marriage, but then when she got married, that she kind of recommitted herself to wait until she got married to her husband. And so yeah, it was really beautiful to hear that, and just like seeing the redemption in that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Because with Pure Heart Japan, we're really seeking God to know how to share his heart on this topic. And there's a lot of moms that are wondering how to share this with their kids, and dads as well.
I think it's really important to have, whether it's your parents or some kind of leaders or like mentors in your life who you can talk about it with, or if you're struggling and having temptations like that, you can talk about it with someone, and like that's okay, and they can pray with you. I did with my mom to some extent, maybe not like fully, but also with that missionary. Yeah, I felt like it was a very open conversation with her, and so
that's so amazing that your mom was open and like not embarrassed.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of parents were a bit embarrassed sometimes to talk openly. That's, like, kudos to your mom.
Yeah.
And on that, I think it's really important to keep the conversation about purity going, not just when people are young, because there are people that are single longer, right? And I had someone I know who was in their 30s, and they just kind of, like you said, when the devil causes you to forget, like she just forgot, because she hadn't heard this message in like 15 years, and like whatever. And so just having that be not just something youth only, but continuously, like just reminding one another, about good plan.
Exhort one another every day, so long as it is called today, Hebrews said, so that you may not grow hardened to the deceitfulness of sin. It's so deceitful. In the moment, it just seems, oh, this is good, right? No. Absolutely.
Good word.
We talked about how, there's ropes, there's chains, that this momentary pleasure of sex before marriage will have damage later. And scriptures talks about how Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So he is definitely going to be trying to get us to forget things, to get us to make excuses. And the first part of resisting the devil is an important thing as well, to even practice saying, maybe even out loud when feeling temptation, no, I reject that. I think is useful. And then, of course, drawing near to God. and like, no, I'm going to wait for that good thing. I'm going to wait for that good thing, your good thing, God. Even audibly saying such things can be helpful, I think.
So it's good.
Yeah.
That's great.
I was raised in a church setting, and even when I went through foster care, it was church families that took me in, so I was able to stay in the same church. And I think, like you mentioned, a lot of the message that is heard around churches, at least in America, at least in the last couple decades, when I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, was indeed like, oh, don't have sex before marriage, I think. Not really any grounding, just kind of bad. I would say it was beautiful. It was a beautiful transition upon getting married and knowing it was God's design. That's the word Erika used. I think that was one of the key undergirding ideas that helped us from stumbling into sexual intimacy before marriage, was just a core belief that, you know, I'm not exactly sure the details, but I know enough to know it's not God's design, and his design is surely best. And it wasn't until after marriage that we could understand that. It'd be very hard probably for anyone to understand that God's design for sex and marriage is best before marriage, except with an overarching experience of the goodness of his plans. But then after marriage, when we could only experience this new thing with each other, wow. And I wish more people had said the good part and not just the bad part of God's design. Not just God's design is to wait, don't, but oh my goodness, I wish, you know, more married couples had said, it's wonderful. It's so wonderful to have this intimacy with your spouse. And not only that, but it's wonderful to not have any side chains pulling your attention or making comparisons in your head. But this beautiful thing is specifically a marriage thing. You know, it's really helped me to not think thoughts of unfaithfulness, for example, because I've never experienced sex with someone else. And so it's not a free thing. It's a marriage thing. And just so many blessings that I've experienced afterwards. And I wish some married couples could have shared more in my life growing up.
Erika, you'd mentioned like that particular challenge you'd mentioned before about the other side of the coin was saying like sex is so good after marriage, and then not really sharing about the complexity of it.
For us, and I can't speak for other couples, and for me myself, like sex hasn't necessarily been easy, and it's like, yeah, even though we have waited and like we've only been with each other, that it hasn't been like completely magical and like so easy. Sex is very complex, and it's kind of like combining so many parts of like intimacy and just like emotional, relational, spiritual, and yeah, like some people might say like sex is just physical or just the carnal aspect of it, but I think you, at the end of the day, you still can't deny like you have a connection with that person. Really understanding what marriage is too, and that it is a lifelong commitment.
The fact that you have a committed relationship from the beginning, that means when you come into these issues, whatever the issue is in a marriage, whether it's financial or communication or sexual, it's like you have that foundation, so you get through it and you go through it. Whereas we feel, you know, so much compassion for people who they had a bump in the road, you know, in certain areas, and it's like the foundation in their marriage is not like that. But these things really just, you know, can sink the ship, so to speak. We really want to encourage people that it's that element of your commitment one to another that started before you were married, that you built the foundation for this to weather the storms that you're going through.
Yeah, we had that first year too of like just us time, and yeah, even just through the hard things that we've been through, like I think it's helped to strengthen and deepen our marriage too. A single person, yeah, like having that really good solid relationship with Jesus, and yeah, I think that is really where it starts. A relationship can be an idol too, and
Sure.
like you can just idolize that person, but yeah, I think our eyes need to be on Jesus, and just having a relationship with him becomes makes it stronger for your marriage with with both of your eyes on Jesus.
Having a foundation. I think the messages we receive through culture are so off base and off God's good design, and we won't realize it unless we think deeply about what God's design is and believe it strongly within ourselves. So whether it's innocent Disney movies or chick flicks or dramas, or even the rougher things like pornography and commercial depictions of sexuality to get you to buy a product, all of their depictions are so far off base. And I think having a firm relationship with the Lord that leads one to experience a love that surpasses others is essential to being able to wait. Digging into it, I think, can be helpful for me. Like I said, I didn't dig into it as much as I should have or could have, but I knew that the Lord loved me so deeply, and I knew that his way was best, and in that love I wanted to please him in his grace.